Okay, with doing the ideal party and ideal character classes for like the six different classes I did, I'm now going to get into kind of like the ideal big bad evil guys or BBEGs. So I'm going to go over the concept of like how you can incorporate the big bad evil guy into a campaign. Of course, I'm going to kind of take a different twist to it because most often people like, oh, let's do vampires, let's do liches, and let's do like an evil wizard and everything. So I'm going to take a kind of like a side step because like when I say vampires, most people think of like the adventure book Curse of Strahd, and then think of liches with Vecna even Ruin having come out this year. Those are usually like okay, let's focus on undead, and we got adventure books on that, and so I'm actually going to take a different approach and present ideas for like a big bad evil guy. Now I'm going to kind of like come into the aspect based on levels and everything. So like you could in a sense introduce like a new campaign, old campaign, or new characters, new players, veteran players. We kind of try and come at from that angle and everything. So, for instance, with new players, like if you're not necessarily into like a one shots, which would be good to kind of introduce new players into the whole D&D. If I'm going to come at this also as like if you want to do your own thing, not do like the adventure books like Curse of Strahd or Vecna Even Ruined that I mentioned, or do like a one shot sort of like Candlekeep Mysteries or like Tales from the Yawning Portal and everything. While those are great unto themselves and everything and are perfect for being able to introduce new players, I'm coming at this as an angle from like, hey, look, this is something I want to do completely made up myself and everything as DM. So I'm actually going to start off like pulling directly from the good old Monsters Manual. So I'm going to be, I guess, this way as DMs and everything. You have like I'm always a big fan of saying like if you're like a player, the only two things you need is a player's handbook and the dice and everything. DM, yeah, you can get away with that, but I'm going to say that like as a DM, you're going to want to not only get this, but a DM guide as well, so that way you have that good foundation, like I always say. So I'm basically pulling the hobgoblin from the monster manual here. So as like the big bad evil guy, I'm going base him off the hobgoblin warlord, and so now with introducing this big bad evil guy, it takes this stance of like maybe like introducing the calamity of war. So like maybe the hobgoblin legions are starting to spread across the land, and like the local aristocrats, the kings and dukes, and they call upon adventurers to go and like stop like this evil hobgoblin warlord that's rampaging across the land, and they are trying to stop him from upending everything that everyone's ever worked to create and everything. And so, in historical context, think of like the Huns rampaging across the steppes or whatever, and the same thing like with the Mongolians invading China and everything. So like, it's that kind of concept using the hobgoblin warlord as like the big bad evil guy. So he is like or she, whoever like you have as the hobgoblin warlord. Think of something like that where you now have the hobgoblin horde rampaging across the land and to save the kingdom and everything. And the aristocrats, like I said, call upon the heroes to go and in a sense, do battle and try and defeat the hobgoblin warlord. So now I'm coming at this one as like a kind of like an introductory, maybe low level campaign idea. So like you could quite easily start people off at like level one, and maybe they're called upon to like, oh hey, look, we need adventurers while our city our military is busy shoring up defenses on our outposts and everything. We might need uh, adventurers to kind of like infiltrate layers and encampments and stuff like that. Act as like maybe uh, Navy SEALs or Special Forces or something, like where you as the party go out and maybe raid you got reports of a local a keep that fell or ruins of a keep, and you go out and search that, and the idea is like the warlord had sent some of his one of his captains or whatever out to overtake that ruin and start building up and everything. So like the adventuring group is sent out to kind of stop that hobgoblin captain, and so like now, well, the warlord may he might show up and the adventurers bust in and you introduce the big bad evil guy sort of that way and everything, or you could like have him as like an overarching like okay he's kind of in the background and you eventually get to like the point where like you once you level up go into that ruined keep and you take out his captain and his squad or whatever. The big bad evil guy starts to take notice when the group starts leveling up and they start going to camping and start in a sense getting victory after victory, and the hobgoblin warlord is now directly opposed to the player group and everything. So that's how you could introduce like the hobgoblin warlord as the big bad evil guy and everything. And so this would be a good way, like a good introductory to get especially new players into the whole idea of role playing and everything. And so of course now this is going to be more geared towards martial classes and stuff like that, of course, where we get into the ideal party. Yeah, you're going to have your barbarian and your paladin are going to be first and foremost, and they're going to shine. But that doesn't mean your stuff like your rogue, your ranger, like your wizard and your cleric, they're not going to be completely useless, because you could tie them into going up against quite possibly equivalent squads on the hobgoblins. You might introduce hobgoblin wizards and everything, even though traditionally hobgoblins are a martial society and you tend towards being more of your fighters, your barbarians, your rangers, your monks and stuff like that. You could introduce for instance the hobgoblin captain that you might first go up against might be a fighter, and he might in his group he might have two lieutenants, one's a wizard and one's a cleric, and he might have a squad of underlings that might be the NPC class or of warriors or something. So you could introduce that way. So you could have wizard versus wizard, cleric versus cleric type of deal, and the hobgoblin scout is actually a rogue or geared towards the rogue type of class and everything. So that way you have adversaries that the PCs can go up against, and so you could quite possibly have the same adversaries. So using the ruined keep where you come across the hobgoblin captain, you could use the idea okay, he's an underling of the big bad evil guy of the warlord, but now he's the introductory evil guy that you go up against, and you're going up against him and his squad, and they're pretty much the equivalent of the party, the PC party and everything. So now you've got in a sense a series of adventures already lined up. So now you come in and do battle with the hobgoblin squad, the captain and his underlings and everything, but you don't necessarily kill them outright or whatever, but you are able to defeat them and run them off, and maybe you find out some local goblins had taken up residence, and then they had fled into the forest, and you make allies with the goblins, and they come back to the ruined keep and everything, and they start helping build it back up, and that's another twist that you can do. And okay, well, they were at war with the hobgoblins, and it just never the twists and turns and plots, the twists that you can do just kind of never ending. So now with them the hobgoblin captain and his squad retreating, now you just got oh well, we didn't get rid of them, so now we got to go out and search for them. So that furthers the adventure, and so now you could have a whole overarching theme. So the hobgoblin captain and his squad retreat back to the warlord. He reports and then of course the warlord, obviously being the first encounter, he's hey, get it done. And so then as and the the PC party goes up against the hobgoblin party, they do skirmishes and kind of maybe go different locations and everything, and maybe the PCs go out and find a local dungeon, but they run into the hobgoblin squad again, and you have several different encounters over several different adventures, and you can maybe you finally defeat the hobgoblin party, and then the warlord comes and the squad hasn't reported in, and then he comes across and must be those PCs, and so now you have a way to build up to that hobgoblin warlord, and you can have that a final showdown after maybe a whole year's worth of campaign sessions and everything, like going back and forth, and like maybe you level up the characters from like levels 1 to 6 or whatever, doing battle with like, the hobgoblin captain and his squad, and then like all of a sudden the warlord takes notice and like, okay, now you're at level 6, and like you go to an encounter with him where he actually you actually are introduced to both each are introduced to each other. So the hobgoblin warlord is actually now introduced to the parts like, oh, you're the upstarts who are causing me so much problems and everything. So now he kind of retreats and calls in like to some of his elite troopers, who are like in a sense like the next group of villains that the characters do battle with over like several different adventures, and they you level them up for like maybe like level 6 to 12 or something, and then finally at like level 13, like 12, 13 or something, you finally are able to like cause enough havoc to like the warlord's legions and everything that he had like rides them out in like a one final battle, and like the PCs are able to get like a group of soldiers up, and so they do one final battle like level 12 or 13, and then you can end the campaign with like the PCs defeating the warlord, and like and then like they basically kill him off, and like the legions disband and everything and go back to their homeland or whatever, and they save the realm and everything. So that's like a concept that you can use to, like as an introductory idea for like a big bad evil guy. So like and that's going forward. I'm going to kind of pull like ideas like using monsters and stuff from the monster manual to kind of like be like, oh hey, here's something like out of the ordinary that you might be able to do, uh, that like could quite take in a sense different turns than like you find in your traditional like adventure books, or like most of the time, like I say, most people are like, oh well, let's do vampires, let's do like liches, or let's do the goblins and orcs and stuff. So those are usually traditionally. So hobgoblins, yes, are common and everything, but like they could be quite different enough to be able to, as I've laid out here in this kind of adventure, to be like, okay, here's one way you could introduce like the big bad evil guy as a hobgoblin, which is common, but not as common as, like I said, like the liches, the vampires, the goblins, and the orcs.